The uninvited guessed the obsidian vault, hummed with barely contained tension as the galaxy's elite gathered for the most exclusive auction in known space. Towering Zephyrians with their crystalline carapaces mingled with tentacled Moravans, while hulking Korath merchants displayed their wealth through bioluminescent implants. The air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation as ancient bioengineered dragons, living weapons from forgotten civilizations, awaited their new masters. Security Chief Vextar monitored the proceedings through compound eyes, his arthropod form perfectly suited for surveillance. The auction house's defenses were impenetrable. Quantum barriers, psionic dampeners, and enough firepower to level a small moon. Nothing could breach the vault uninvited. Then she walked in, a human child. No more than 12 standard years, her auburn hair catching the artificial light as she strode through the main entrance. She wore simple clothing, a faded jumpsuit that had seen better days, yet she moved with quiet confidence that made hardened criminals step aside. Impossible, Vextar chittered into his communicator. All entrances are secured. How did the child approached the authentication station, seemingly oblivious to the hundreds of eyes tracking her movement. With steady hands, she produced a genetic keycard 1 that pulsed with an energy signature Vextar had never seen. The scanner hesitated, running through countless security protocols. Then, impossibly, it flashed green. Access granted. Tier 1 bidder status confirmed. The auction hall fell silent. Tier 1 status was reserved for planetary rulers, crime lords, and ancient beings whose wealth could purchase star systems. This human child, this nothing from a backwater species, had just been granted the highest bidding privileges. Auctioneer Zilnuth, a being whose vocal cords could produce sounds across 17 different frequencies, found himself momentarily speechless. The child walked to an empty seat in the front row, ignoring the whispers and stares that followed her. Perhaps someone's offspring has stolen credentials, suggested Baroness Velara, her blue-skinned features twisted in disdain. Humans are known for their creativity with rules. But merchant Prince Kethron, whose longevity had allowed him to witness the rise and fall of species, shook his massive head. Look at her posture, her breathing. She's not afraid. His multiple eyes narrowed. Something about her is ... wrong. The child sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. Around her, the most powerful beings in the galaxy exchanged nervous glances. Whatever game this was, whatever trick or scheme, the rules had just changed. In the holding chambers below, something stirred. Ancient neural pathways, dormant for decades, began to flicker with recognition. The auction's star attraction, a magnificent crimson dragon with scales that seemed to hold captured starlight, lifted its massive head. For the first time in 10 years, it opened its eyes. The revelation the first dragon brought to auction was a lesser specimen, a sleek, serpentine creature with emerald scales that rippled like liquid metal. Bidding opened at 50 million credits, standard galactic currency. Do I hear 60 million? Auctioneer Zilnuth's voice resonated through the chamber as tentacles raised in eager competition. The child remained motionless, her eyes fixed not on the dragon, but on something beyond the auction floor. Vextar noticed her pupils dilating, slightly, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. Sold to Warlord Grixkin for 200 million credits. The crowd applauded politely as the dragon was led away, its neural inhibitors ensuring complete docility. 3 more dragons followed, each selling for astronomical sums. The child watched silently, her expression growing more solemn with each sale. Finally, the moment everyone had waited for arrived. And now, our crown jewel, Zilnuth announced, his voice reaching crescendo across multiple frequencies. Specimen designation, Paraxis, a full-grown war dragon from the Andorian conflict. Captured during the Dragon Rebellion Wars. Neural conditioning. Complete. Threat level. Neutralized. The massive crimson dragon was wheeled out on a gravity platform, its form magnificent even in captivity. Chains of quantum-forged metal bound its limbs, while neural dampeners created a crown of pulsing lights around its head. Its eyes were closed, seemingly lost in artificial dreams. Bidding opens at 500 million credits. The child stood. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward her small form as she stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly across the vast chamber. That dragon is not for sale. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Baroness Velara's melodic voice cut through the tension. Child, you clearly don't understand the nature of these proceedings. Perhaps you should— My name is Zara Valen, the girl interrupted, her voice steady despite her youth. I am the daughter of Commander Darius Valen, human military, presumed, killed in the Dragon Rebellion Wars. The laughter died instantly. Every being in the chamber knew that name, the human who had somehow bonded with a dragon, who had fought against the Galactic Alliance's attempts to enslave the ancient creatures. My father didn't die in those wars, Zara continued, reaching into her jumpsuit. He survived. He bonded with a rogue dragon, and he raised me among the last free brood. She pulled out a small device, a bioscanner that immediately began glowing with soft, pulsing light. The readings it displayed made several aliens step backward in shock. Pure dragon bioseal, whispered Merchant Prince Kethron, his ancient voice filled with awe. That's impossible. Dragons haven't freely bonded with any species in millennia. Zara's eyes never left the chain dragon. That dragon isn't a weapon. She isn't property. Her voice cracked slightly, revealing the child beneath the determination. She's my mother, and I'm taking her home. The auction hall erupted in chaos. The awakening security forces moved instantly, their weapons charging as they surrounded the small human. Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he coordinated the response, but something in the child's posture gave him pause. She wasn't preparing. To fight or flee, she was waiting. Stand down, young human, Vextar commanded, his translator rendering his chittering into standard Galactic. You will be detained for questioning, and— The dragon's eyes opened, not the slow, drugged awakening of a sedated creature, but the sharp, intelligent gaze of an apex predator. The neural dampeners sparked and failed one by one, their circuits, unable to contain whatever was happening within the dragon's mind. Impossible, breathed Dr. Kexlani, the auction's chief neural engineer. The conditioning is absolute. Years of programming, chemical suppression. Zara stepped closer to the platform, her bioscanner now blazing with light. You can't condition. Away, love, Doctor. You can't program away the bond between a mother and her child. The dragon's massive head turned toward the girl, and for a moment, predator and child simply looked at each other. Then, incredibly, the dragon's expression softened. A low, rumbling sound emerged from its throat. Not a roar, but something almost like purring? Paraxis, Zara whispered, the name carrying weight that made several aliens step back. I've missed you too. The quantum chains began to strain as the dragon tested its bonds. Metal that could contain a small star started to show stress fractures. Around the auction hall, panic began to spread. This is impossible, Baroness Velara said, her usual composure cracking. Dragons are weapons. They're beasts of war. Not. Not what? Zara asked, turning to face the crowd. Not capable of love? Not capable of family? You enslaved them, chained them, sold them like property, and convinced yourselves they were just sophisticated weapons. Her young voice carried an authority that made ancient beings fall silent. But they're not. They're people. They're family. The dragon Paraxis let out a sound that was definitely not in any catalog of dragon vocalizations. It was complex, layered, almost musical. And somehow, impossibly, it sounded like speech. Zara nodded as if she understood perfectly. "Yes, I know. Father sent me. He said it was time to come home." The crowd was backing away now, some species fleeing entirely. The carefully controlled environment of the auction was dissolving into chaos as the most fundamental assumptions about dragons were shattered before their eyes. Vextar raised his weapon, but his hands were shaking. "The dragon will be returned to containment. The child will be." Paraxis looked directly at him. The security chief had faced down pirates, rebels, and cosmic horrors. But the intelligence in those ancient eyes, the clear, unmistakable awareness of a being who understood exactly what was happening, froze him in place. "She's not a weapon," Zara said quietly. "She's a mother who wants to go home." The quantum chains snapped like twine. The reckoning Paraxis rose to her full height as the broken chains fell away like discarded jewelry. 40 feet of crimson scales. An ancient power stretched wings that had once darkened the skies of a dozen worlds. But instead of the rampage everyone expected, she simply stepped down from the platform with surprising grace. The auction hall's defensive systems activated. Automatically. Energy barriers slammed into place. Weapons systems emerged from hidden alcoves, and containment fields sparked to life around the dragon. All of them failed on contact with her scales. Their energy simply absorbed and dissipated. "Fascinating," murmured Dr. Kexlani, even as she backed toward the exits. "The bioengineering is far more sophisticated than we believed. She's not just breaking the containment, she's negating it entirely." Zara walked calmly to Paraxis's side, her small hand reaching up to touch the dragon's massive foreleg. The contrast was stunning. A child who barely reached the creature's ankle, yet showed no fear of the being that had sent galactic armies fleeing. "You're wondering how this is possible," Zara said, addressing the crowd without turning around. "How a human child could walk into the most secure facility in the galaxy. How she could have bonding markers that supposedly don't exist. How she could wake a dragon that's been conditioned for years." She finally turned, and several beings gasped. The child's eyes were no longer entirely human. Flecks of gold swirled in her irises, and when she blinked, the motion seemed somehow reptilian. "The answer is simple," she continued. "You never understood what you were dealing with. You saw weapons because that's what you wanted to see. But dragons aren't weapons. They're people. They're capable of love, of family, of choosing their own path." Merchant Prince Kethron, his ancient mind processing implications that terrified him, spoke carefully. "Child, if what you're saying is true, then the wars were genocide," Zara said flatly. "You hunted them, captured them, broke their minds, and sold them as tools. You convinced yourselves they were just sophisticated animals because it was easier than admitting you were enslaving an entire species." Paraxis made another of those complex vocalizations, and Zara nodded. "She says some of you knew. Some of you always knew they were people. You just chose profit over conscience." The crowd was thinning rapidly now, but those who remained were the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They didn't flee, they calculated. "Even if this is true," Baroness Melara said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her, "one dragon cannot challenge the established order. The neural conditioning protocols can be improved." The containment, Paraxis's head swiveled toward the Baroness, and those ancient eyes held an intelligence that made the alien noble's words die in her throat. "You're right," Zara said quietly. "One dragon can't challenge the galaxy's power structure." She smiled, and for the first time, she looked truly like a child, except for those golden eyes. But she's not alone. The auction hall's main viewport, a massive transparent aluminum window looking out into space, suddenly filled with shadows. Dozens of them, moving with purpose and grace through the void. Dragons, free dragons. Dragons that had never been. Captured, never been conditioned, never been broken. The last free brood, Zara said, as the assembled beings stared in horror at the fleet of ancient creatures surrounding their supposedly impregnable station. They've been waiting, watching, learning, and now they're here to take their people home. The new alliance, the Obsidian Vault's defenses, were legendary throughout the galaxy. Quantum barriers that could stop a fleet, weapons that could shatter moons, shields that had never been breached. All of them were designed to keep threats out, not to contain what was already inside. Paraxis stepped toward the massive viewport, her movements fluid and purposeful. She placed one clawed hand against the transparent aluminum and spoke not the roar of a beast, but complex, layered sounds that carried meaning and intention. The response came immediately. The free dragons outside began to glow, their scales radiating energy that made the station's sensors scream warnings. But they weren't attacking, they were singing. Harmonic resonance, whispered Dr. Kexlani, her scientific mind still functioning. Despite the terror, they're matching the station's structural frequency. They're going to... The viewport didn't shatter. It simply ceased to exist, its molecular bonds dissolved by the dragon's coordinated effort. The station's atmosphere should have rushed out into space, but instead, a shimmering barrier of energy held it in place. Dragon science, Zara explained as the assembled beings watched in awe. They've had millions of years to perfect it. Energy manipulation, matter conversion, gravity control, all things they never needed to use until you forced them to. Through the opening, the largest dragon any of them had ever seen approached. Its scales were deep blue-black, like captured starlight, and its eyes held the weight of eons. When it spoke, its voice was somehow translated into perfect galactic standard. I am Valdus, speaker for the free brood. I come to reclaim what was stolen. The station shuddered as more dragons entered, their forms filling the auction hall. But instead of destruction, they moved with careful precision, their attention focused on the holding areas below, where dozens of their enslaved kin awaited auction. This is an act of war, Vextar managed, though his weapon remained lowered. The Galactic Council will adapt, Zara interrupted. Because humanity has chosen a side. As if summoned by her words, human ships began emerging from hyperspace. Not the sleek vessels of the established fleet, but something new craft that seemed to merge human engineering with dragon biotechnology. Their hulls pulsed with organic energy, and their movements through space were more alive than mechanical. Commander Darius Valen sends his regards, Zara said, watching the shocked faces around her. He's been busy these past 10 years, building, planning, and most importantly, learning from our new family. The lead human ship hailed the station, and the voice that emerged was weathered but strong. This is Commander Valen of the Human Dragon. Alliance. We're here to negotiate the release of all enslaved dragons. We're prepared to offer trade agreements, technology sharing, and mutual defense treaties to any species willing to recognize dragon sovereignty. And if we refuse? Baroness Velara asked, though her voice lacked its earlier arrogance. Valdris turned those ancient eyes toward her. Then you will face the consequences of centuries of genocide. We are patient beings, but our patience has limits. The threat hung in the air, like a living thing. Around the station, more dragons appeared, not dozens but hundreds. An entire species that had been thought nearly extinct, revealing themselves as a force that could challenge the galaxy's established order. The age of dragon slavery is over, Zara announced, her young voice carrying across the station's communication systems. The age of alliance begins now. Humanity has chosen to stand with the dragons, not as masters and servants, but as equals. As family. She looked up at Paraxis, who lowered her great head to nuzzle the child gently. Some bonds can't be broken by chains or conditioning. Some connections transcend species. And some children grow up to change the galaxy. The auction hall, once filled with the galaxy's elite bidding on enslaved creatures, now hosted the birth of something unprecedented, a true alliance between species, built not on domination, but on mutual respect and love. The dragons had returned not as weapons, but as people, and they were no longer alone. The end.